You're listening to the Creative Mindset Podcast. My name is Isolde Trachtenberg, and I'm thrilled to welcome you to this new and evolved podcast. This is a combination of the weekly Tell Your Story Better podcast as well as the Creative Kind Daily Show. I decided that it was time to bring these two great loves of mine together into one seamless show that will allow me to communicate with you about how you can live your best creative life. So I'm thrilled to welcome you, and I hope that you will enjoy. Hello, and welcome to the show. Welcome to the Creative Mindset Podcast. My name is Isolde Trachtenberg, and I'm thrilled you're joining me today. In this show, we explore how to live your exciting, creative, and most fulfilling life. Hello, and welcome again. Today, I want to talk about something that I've been spending a lot of time thinking about, and that is, how do you want to be remembered? And I know it's a strange question. It doesn't mean to me, how do you want to be remembered after you die necessarily, but it does mean, how do you want every person, everyone you interact with, to remember you after your interaction? Now, it could be that we could take the sort of more somber view and look at it from the perspective of, after you're gone, after you pass away, how do you want people to think about you? But it could also be something that's a lot more immediate. It could be something as much as you had an interaction with someone at the grocery store. How do you want them to think about you afterward? And I'm not saying you should spend a lot of time on this. You shouldn't necessarily go, oh, I'm going to agonize over what I did or didn't do, what I said or didn't say. That's not exactly what I mean. More to the point, I'm talking about being very clear with yourself about your intention with every interaction you are about to have, or did have, and also about the impression you left when you were done. Speaking of grocery stores, I'm going to tell you about something that I found really challenging. This was an interaction I had with a woman at the grocery store. Speaking of grocery stores, here goes. I was at the Trader Joe's and I was making my way towards the checkout lines. And I was walking my cart, getting ready to stand in line, and a woman, an older woman, probably about, I'd say in her late 60s, saw that I was walking towards the checkout line, and she sped up and ran to get ahead of me. And she did. And then she turned around and she crowed, "Ha ha, I beat you." And it floored me. I'll be honest with you. I didn't have any idea how to react to what had just happened. Now, I could understand, for example, if a 9-year-old had done it. Yeah, okay, a 9-year-old had to do that. But a 69-year-old, that took me aback. I didn't know how to react. And the only thing I could say to her in the moment was, wow, it seems to me like you really needed a win today. And I had to sort of step away from that and not think about it so much anymore because it really perplexed me. I didn't have a way of understanding what was happening. I would have loved to have had something that was a little bit better in my head about it, but it stymied me. And I remember the person who was checking people out at the grocery store said to me, "Ma'am, I know you were first. Would you like to go ahead?" And I just said, no, that's okay. She should go. It's totally fine. And I stood there and I thought about it and I went, well, if I want to be remembered as someone who's kind, what does she want to be remembered as? And it sounds a little strange to say that now because I can't possibly know what was going on in her mind. It was just really, really strange to me about that, about her need to not only get ahead of someone else in line, but also to sort of brag about it afterward. It made me feel, frankly, a little sorry for her that she needed that win so badly. And I hope that she had a really great day afterwards. That's the best I can do. I don't know anything else about her. She's a stranger, but it was really interesting that a woman that someone who's an adult would do that. But it did bring me to mind that question of how do you want to be remembered? What do you want people to think of you after you've had an interaction with them? And I believe it was Forbes who said that the true measure of someone is how they treat people who can do nothing for them. And I take that the same thought with animals and with children and with everybody. It doesn't matter who they are, that the true measure of us is how we treat those who can't do a thing for us. And so I couldn't do anything for this woman except for to let her go ahead of me and just let her go on her merry way. But what I could do for myself is sort of come back to that idea of how do I want to be remembered? What do I want her to think of our interaction? What do I want the people around me to think of our interaction? Because I think it matters. I think kindness and awareness adds to a greater understanding, a greater level of it, and a greater energy around it in the whole world. So the smallest act of understanding, the smallest act of kindness becomes the most amazing and the largest thing sometimes. So that's the question that I have to ask you today is, in your daily interactions, do you have an idea of how you would like the people around you to remember you? And not so much after you die, because that's big, and you can aim for that if you'd like, but I'm talking about the day-to-day stuff of life. What do you want people to think of you after your interaction with them is over? Do you want them to know you as a strong person? Do you want them to know you as a kind person? Do you want them to think of you as a go-getter, as someone who's amenable? Do you want them to think of you as someone who's nice, who's sweet, who's successful, who's engaging? What is it that is in your mind? So take a second right now and think to yourself, what do I want as far as my effect to be, right? How do I want the next person I interact with to remember me after our interaction is over? Give it some thought and maybe even write it down. And if you have any kind of a meeting or an interview or a date, anything, think about what your lasting impression might be and what you want it to be. I think it's really important to give thought to that, not the interaction itself, but the after effects of it. Both can inform one another so that you can get the optimal interaction. And that brings me to the second part of this, I guess, 4-part episode. I really have started thinking about everything in my life as almost the after part, the afterward. And this part is about leaving it better than I found it. So if I have an interaction, I want to leave the person better than I found them. If I go to a place, I want to leave it better than I found it. I think it probably is that whole idea of take only photographs, leave only footprints. Don't leave trash. Don't leave garbage. Don't leave bad tastes in anyone else's mouth, right? So leave it better than you found it. And that means to me that you get to ask yourself the question, what can I do right now to make things better? It doesn't have to be a huge thing. You don't have to give someone $1 million. But what can you do to leave everything just a little bit better than you found it? So if you find yourself in a situation and you're not sure what to do or what to say, that's another question you can ask yourself. What can I do right now to make things better? Or what can I do right now so that I'll leave things better than I found them? And here's something that I've just had a real realization about, and it's just literally about 15 minutes ago. It's about meeting new people, and it could be new customers, new clients, new friends, acquaintances, new neighbors, people on the subway or on the bus, in the store, it doesn't matter. I guess to me, I said this to a friend I was just talking on the phone to, and what it was that we need to meet people where they are instead of where we want them to be. We have a lot of preconceived notions, right? Everybody does. I certainly do, about how we want things to be or how we think people are being. And that might be great, or it might be totally off. And you can't know until you're in the stew, as it were, exactly what's going on. So that's the question to ask ourselves. The question is, where are they? Instead of where do I want them to be? Because sometimes, no matter how much you might want someone to be, have a certain attitude or to be in a certain mental space or even a certain physical space, they're just not there. And there is not a darn thing you can do about it. You really can't. You can try, but if they're not there, you're basically stuck waiting. And you're hoping that they'll be where you imagine you want them, but they're not. So you have to manage your expectations. I know that's sort of a buzz phrase now. You have to manage your expectations, but you really do. You have to look at them and you have to go, okay, what's actually happening instead of what I want to have happen? What are they actually saying instead of what I want to be hearing? Because seldom are people going to be concerned about what you want. Basically, rule number 1 is it isn't all about you. And rule number 2 is first see rule number 1. And I think that's it for all of us. You know, we're all the main character in the story of our lives, right? In my world, I'm the main character. In your world, you're the main character. The only way we can see things is from our perspective. But if we really want to develop those intimate connections with people, we need to, at the very least, figure out that they have their own perspectives. Ideally, though, we'll want to, and this is another buzzword I know, have empathy for where the other person is. And empathy, by the way, doesn't mean feeling bad for them. It's being able to put yourself in their shoes, right? What is their experience? And if you don't know, you are free to ask. Where are you? What's going on? How are you? What are you thinking? All of those things often are tropes, right? We hear them in movies, we read them in books a lot. Oh, what are you thinking? And it sounds trite and strange, but it's actually really valuable. If you want to know what someone is thinking, ask them. Don't try and figure it out all by yourself, because you could be wildly off. Remember, they are the star of their own show, just like you are the star of yours. So unless you really know them very well, and even if you do really know them very well, you might not be able to figure all that out on your own. So ask for clues. And remember, my favorite questions are always how and what questions. The why, the where, the when, those will give you facts or justifications, but they won't give you information. If you ask a how question, if you ask a what question, it's going to take thought and it's going to yield you a more thoughtful, more full answer. And you can then, armed with that knowledge, with that new information, proceed from there and have a much more meaningful interaction than if you just sort of went, oh, why is this going on? Or, oh, I know what they're thinking. Almost always, you don't know what they're thinking, even if it seems like you do. So if you're ever wondering, ask. That's going to be the best way to get you the optimal interaction so that you leave it better than you found it and that they remember you well. This brings me to the last part of this 4-part episode. Today is an anniversary of sorts for me, and it's a big one. 45 years ago today, February 27th, 1974, my family immigrated to the USA. I was 7 years old, and we flew in from Rome, Italy. It's not where I was born, of course. If you've ever listened to this show before, you know I was born in the former Soviet Union in a little tiny country called Moldova. But we had to go through a year-long immigration process in order for me to be able to be here. So we spent time living in lots of different countries on the way, and Italy was the last stop on our year-long journey. We were there for 2 months, and then we finally got the go-ahead to leave there and move to the USA. We got on a plane. We flew in towards JFK Airport in New York, and we landed on February 27th, 1974. Every year on this date, I celebrate because I love this country. I am thrilled that I got to grow up here and to live my life here. And I also love that I'm going to get to live in New York. And here's how that all relates. When I first saw through the little oblong airplane window the New York skyline and the Statue of Liberty, I didn't know that she was the Statue of Liberty at that point. But when I first saw it all lit up, I remember it was dark when we flew in, it blew me away. Everything blew me out of the water, and it enthralled me. I didn't even know how to handle what I was seeing. I was so completely awestruck by, I guess, the New York skyline. And I vowed to myself that I would live there someday. And I was all of 7 years old, and I had no idea really what was happening and that we were going to be living in this strange new world from then on. I grew up in Detroit because the very next day, February 28th, we flew to Detroit to begin our new lives. But I remember very vividly thinking to myself, I'm going to live here someday. And now, 45 years later, can you believe it? It's finally going to happen. I'm moving to New York. Yay! I can't wait. My husband and I are packing our cats and our musical instruments and juggling clubs, and we're headed to the Big Apple. I'm super excited about it because that moment of seeing it, of just being dumbstruck by the possibilities of all of those lights and those buildings and the romantic vista before me, it tugged on my 7-year-old little heart so hard that every day since then I've wanted to do this. I've wanted to move to New York. And it's a dream achieved, right? Doing this, making it happen is something that I've been wanting for 45 years. So I'm thrilled about that. But I'm also thrilled to get the opportunity to be someone who gets to achieve the goal. And it's so important that if you have any sort of idea or wish or goal, and you feel like you have to put it on a shelf, I'm here to tell you that even years later, decades later, you can make it come true. And I'm not saying that, you're going to move to Mars if that's your goal, because sometimes you can't do that. But if you keep it in your mind, if you keep working at it, eventually you're going to get at least some semblance of what it is you've been dreaming of this whole time. So a very special happy anniversary to me and to my family for having moved to this amazing country, the United States of America, back in the 70s, and for getting the opportunity to live my dream, to live my very best life, both here in the D.C. area and in the New York area when my husband and I moved there in June. I'm thrilled beyond measure that I'm going to get to finally live there and be part of the electric energy of what I consider to be one of the most amazing, if not the most amazing cities in the world. So if you have a dream, I encourage you to remember me and my very long journey to the Big Apple, because I'm here to tell you, it can happen. I hope you've enjoyed today's episode. If you have questions, if you know someone who needs to hear this, if you know someone who is trying to follow a dream that seems impossible, send them to this episode. I think it's so important to remember that, yeah, we can make our dreams come true. I would love to hear from you about what your dreams are, and I'd love to hear from you about the podcast and what you think of the new format. And until the next time, my name is Isolde Trachtenberg, and I send you all of my love. Thanks so much for joining me today. I really appreciate you being here. Please subscribe to the podcast if you're new, and please tell your friends about the community we're building here. Today's episode was produced by Isolde Trachtenberg and is copyright Isolde Trachtenberg 2018. Today's music was from Kevin MacLeod, Laser Groove, and Ave Marimba, brought to you by Creative Commons License 3.0. As always, please remember this is for educational and entertainment purposes only. Past performance does not guarantee future results, although we can always hope. Until next time, I send you all of my love.